Welcome to the Real Housewives of the Kingdom podcast. My name is Caroline Rogers, and I'm your host and fellow Real Housewife in the Kingdom of God. This life can make us feel overwhelmed and alone, but I know when I hear how God is walking with others through the good and the hard, it gives me courage to keep moving forward and trusting God with it all. If you have ever felt that way, join me and my guests as we chat about our life experiences through the lens of the gospel in areas like marriage, ministry, friendship, and more. My hope is that our time together will remind you God loves you and you are not alone. It's nearly Christmas, and today I'm chatting with my friend Steph Thompson, a Jesus lover, wife, and homemaker in Australia. We are talking about the differences and similarities of Christmas and Christian culture in Australia and here in the States, like the fact that Christmas actually happens in the summer there. Steph also shares some wisdom for approaching social media for business or personal without getting overwhelmed and still enjoying it while bringing glory to God. It's going to be a good one, mate. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Real Housewives of the Kingdom. I am so excited that we are still in my very favorite season, Christmas, and we are continuing in our Christmas series. And today I have a very special guest from Australia. That's right, all the way from Australia. And so I am excited for you all to meet her. This is actually the first time that I have talked with her, we have messaged back and forth on social media for a few years now, but I am really excited to have her on. Welcome, Steph Thompson.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here and at Christmas. It's my favorite time of year.
Yes. Okay. So I found Steph on Instagram and her handle was Steph the Homemaker. And that kind of jumped out to me because I am a homemaker and I love being a homemaker. And that's kind of a rare thing in this day and age for somebody to actually take pride in that. And I think it's a thing to take pride in. So that stuck out to me and I started following her and I've been following along with everything she's been producing and the content she's been producing and her business. And it's just been a delight. And today we are going to get really into Christmas in Australia and Christmas in the States, what the differences are and what that looks like. But first, Steph, would you just introduce yourself, tell us how you met Jesus and a little bit about who you are?
Of course. Well, I had the blessing of growing up in church, thank goodness, and thank my parents.
Amen.
So that's definitely been a huge blessing in my life. And I can definitely see, especially like in my teenage years, that completely saved me multiple times. So yeah, my teenage years had some ups and downs, and that was really where my faith solidified, I'd say, and, became my own. Because when you grow up in church, there is that different, unique journey of actually kind of having your faith become your own rather than your parents. So yeah, that's how I ended up completely in love with Jesus, I guess you'd say.
I grew up in the church as well. And I had kind of a similar thing where I've had a really close relationship with the Lord since I was really small, but there was definitely a moment in my high school years where I had to make the choice for myself and I'm grateful that I had it because I didn't just skate by on my parents' faith. I made a decision at 16 and decided then and there that I couldn't live without him. So here I am today.
Yeah.
So now tell us about how long have you been married? Tell us about your husband.
Yeah, so it's actually my 7-year wedding anniversary kind of when we're recording this. So yeah, we've been married 7 years, which is crazy. Absolutely insane to think that we've been married 7 years. We met essentially through like connect groups at church, like Bible study. He is great. He's a massive nerd. And yeah, we very much kind of complement each other. He's a bit more of like the loosey-goosey and I'm more of the like, let's have a routine and a plan. So we complement each other very well in that.
That's awesome. That's my husband and I are the same, except for now we've been married 22 years. We both still have our qualities like that, but we've learned to really relax into the other strength. And so I've learned to let go a little bit, and he's learned to find some peace in a plan. So
Yep. I can absolutely see that already happening with us. I am a lot more chilled than I used to be.
That's awesome. I love it. How old are you?
I'm
Oh,
31.
okay. Okay. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So in that like early 30s, like, oh, this decade actually does feel different. You know, you hear that. You hear a lot of
Mhm.
people like, yeah, your 30s are totally different to your 20s. They're not lying, just
No,
in
it's
case you're
true.
wondering.
It's true. So last year I entered my 40s. I turned 40
Oh,
last
wow.
year. So now I've been 41 for a little bit. And I am loving 40s so far, but 30s were definitely different. I
Mm,
definitely felt more heard, and I felt like I got a little more respect from people. I felt like for so long, I started working pretty young. I was 16 when I started working professionally. And so
mhm.
I got that very like, well, she's just the kid kind of
Yep.
attitude from people. And so I feel like I didn't really shake that until I was 30. And then when I turned 30, I felt like, like people are taking me seriously.
Yep. Absolutely get what you mean.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's get into Christmas. I just thought that this would be so fun because I've never been to Australia.
Yeah.
Have you been to America before?
No,
Okay.
I really, really want to.
I really, really want to go to Australia. So we both have a Western culture. So it's a similar culturally speaking in some ways, I'm sure, but there's obviously a lot of differences from our culture too. I even think about Canada, where we're on the same continent as Canada, and yet we are actually different culturally than Canada in a lot of ways, even though they
Mm,
speak English and there's a lot of similarities, there's also a lot of differences.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
just I'm excited to talk about that in respect to Christmas. So give us a picture of Christmas growing up in Australia.
So Christmas in Australia is in summer, in case you didn't know. So our seasons are completely opposite to you guys, which is wild. So July is the middle of winter for us. Um, and so that definitely changes a few things. We don't like we're sitting there still singing a lot of the same Christmas carols, you know, Winter Wonderland and all of that kind of thing, but it's kind of ironically. But yeah, so Christmas in Australia is a lot of summer vibes, like Aussie summer vibes. So I think that that's a little bit different than America, just from what I've seen online. But it's, you know, people love the beach here, especially if you happen to live anywhere near the coastline. It's very like beach and barbecues and all that kind of thing. Barbecues here are very relaxed. Like it's just kind of like throw some stuff on a barbecue and hang out. Like it's not like a really like big fancy thing. So yeah, I'd say Christmas is very relaxed, but at the same time, something that's been interesting over the last like 10 or 15 years is it is getting a little bit more Americanized here, which is super fascinating to watch. I actually find the cultural differences between our countries so fascinating, especially because Australia, we have New Zealand, and I feel like that's kind of like America versus Canada. Like you've got a lot of
Yes.
similarities, but you still got a lot of differences. And yeah, it's fascinating to compare the two, but it's very chill.
Well, and I think it's funny that you say that about New Zealand because I feel like over here, a lot of people just think Australia, New Zealand, it's basically the same thing. And you guys are two different countries. I had a friend who
Yeah.
lived in New Zealand for a little while, although I never visited her there. So I heard a little bit about living in New Zealand. Now, are you near the coast?
Yeah, actually, we are really near the coast now. We're the closest we've ever been. So if we wanted to go to a beach, it's like a 10-15 minute drive.
What part of Australia are
We're we're in Victoria, so we're like Melbourne is our main city, and then we've got a lot of suburbs, but
you?
technically we'll just say we're from Melbourne, part of the
Okay.
suburbs.
Okay. So I'm from California. So that's where I'm coming to you from. I've always lived
Cool.
near, like at least an hour from the beach, and beach
Mm,
culture for us, summertime, obviously. Some people go to the beach in the winter, but our coast in California is cold. The water is so cold. Even in the summer, it's so cold. So cold.
wow.
So, okay, so you do barbecues, which we barbecue. Okay, so something and maybe like a little bit off, but we call in California. So I don't know if this is the same in Australia too, but there's different cultures realistically in all of our states. So each of our states kind of have a different culture to them. And essentially is similar to how close European countries are is our states. So that is kind of
Yeah. I
interesting.
find that so interesting.
Yeah.
I find that so interesting. It's not really like that here. Like with there's minor differences,
Okay.
but nothing that drastic at all.
Okay. Well, and this is just something small, but my siblings moved to the South in 2020. And my brother met his wife there and they got married last year. We say, you want to come over for a barbecue? And you said barbecue. That's what we call it here in California. We call it barbecue. And she says, we call it a grill. Do you want to come over for a grill? Well,
So funny.
interesting. Yeah. Anyway, that was kind of a random rambling, but okay, so if you live near the coast, obviously you probably spend some of your Christmas holiday by the beach. Do people get vacations, Christmas vacation? Because I mean, here people kind of get Christmas vacations. So do you take like a vacation during Christmas time typically?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on your industry as well, but a lot of businesses and things shut down for like a week or so over Christmas anyway.
Mhm.
And the way that full-time employment and contract employment works here is that you get paid for public holidays, generally speaking. So you definitely wouldn't work Christmas, but we also have Boxing Day, which is the 26th.
Okay.
And that is a public holiday. And then there's New Year's Day. So there's a lot of public holidays anyway. So even if people's work isn't fully shutting down, like sometimes people just like take 3 days of annual leave or something and they get like a week and a half off.
What is Boxing Day?
I honestly don't actually know the history of Boxing Day. It's
I've
just
heard
this,
it. I've heard about it, but I didn't. I wonder.
it's just it's the day after Christmas where you're kind of in a food coma and you don't really know what's going on. But we have a lot of like Boxing Day sales. Like before Black Friday became a huge thing here because we don't do Thanksgiving, so Black Friday is just kind of infiltrated because of America.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, we have Boxing Day sales. That's the sales we grew up on, was Boxing Day sales.
That's so interesting. That's
Yeah, so
crazy.
everyone, well, not everyone, but people go out and they're like out to get a deal the day after Christmas.
Here, a lot of people will, the week after Christmas, go buy Christmas decorations for the next year because they're all on sale
Yeah,
the day
that's
after.
definitely part of it these days.
Now, do you also take a winter vacation during the month of July?
Yeah, and I mean, our school system is also kind of the opposite to you guys as well. So our school runs calendar yearly. So the summer break is the summer break, just like you guys would have.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the end of the year, which to me makes so much sense. Like the year has ended, school ends, everything ends at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it ends up being, I'd say, anywhere from like the 15th of December onwards, like things start to really wind down for the year kind of everywhere. Like even like with church and things, like youth group will close down for the summer and those kinds of things. Like they'll run activities, but not the usual programs.
Right. And that
And
happens
then
here
kind of like,
in July for
yeah,
summer.
yeah. Yeah. So then like the end of January, start of February is where everything kind of like kicks like fully back into gear with school going back and
So
everything.
that's the new school year is end of January start.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, that's interesting. I had no idea about that. That's so
Yeah. And
cool.
by then it's scorching hot. It's so hot by then. That's the funny thing. Like December is definitely summer, but it's kind of the start of summer, so it's really more spring weather. And I was talking to someone who lives in Florida and we were kind of like comparing what our December weather tends
Mhm.
to be. And honestly, I think if you live in Florida, you kind of have an idea of what our weather here in Melbourne is
Oh,
like at
okay.
Christmas.
Yeah. We
Because
were in Florida.
sometimes we can still get some of the like the rain from the end of spring, like sometimes, but it could also be like 30 degrees, which would be like 80 to 90, I'd say.
So obviously we have a lot of different regions in the states, but in Southern California in particular, where I'm from, it could be cold around Christmas, but often I spent Christmases with shorts on, or what we do is I always tell people this who don't live in warmer climates at Christmas time, but we would put on, you want to wear a sweater because you want to look cute in a Christmas sweater, but you blast your AC because it's 85 degrees outside. And that's what it's
Yeah.
like growing up in
A lot
Southern
of people have started doing that here.
Oh
A
man.
lot of people have started doing that here. There's even the stores have started selling like Christmas jumpers. We call them jumpers.
Mhm.
Sweaters. They've started selling Christmas ones at Christmas time, and it's so funny because you walk out of the car park and it's 40 degrees, like 100 degrees Fahrenheit easily. And you walk in and you're like, I'm not buying a jumper. Why would I buy a jumper right now? But some people are doing it because that Americanized aspect of the culture is definitely hitting us.
I wonder with social media, and I wonder if it's just because we're now exposed to so many other cultures, subcultures,
I would say so.
that kind of thing. I had always dreamed of having a white Christmas just because of White Christmas. I love that Christmas movie. I don't know if you've ever seen
I
White.
dream of that too.
Yeah. And the first time was when my sister actually moved to the South. It snowed on Christmas Eve at her house. And
Oh my
that was the
gosh.
first time I had seen snow like come down. And it was very, very cold the next day, very, very cold. So we got to kind of experience that. We had spent a few years ago, we did a show in New York City over Christmas. And so we were working in Times Square, and I was so excited. I was like, for sure, I'm going to get my white Christmas here in New York City, where it's beautiful and Christmassy, and I love it. And it was about 20 Celsius on Christmas Eve.
Oh my goodness.
And I called my mom, and it
That's
was colder
crazy.
in Southern California. And it was like the warmest
Wow.
Christmas New York had
That's
in forever.
crazy.
I was in a short sleeve dress, and I was wearing knee-high boots, and I had a scarf, but I was like sweating.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I guess even with the ideal, things could be a little different. But yeah, Florida is warmer, and Hawaii too has kind of a different Christmas culture in that respect because it is warmer. So
Yeah.
now, do you guys
that makes
decorate
sense.
Christmas trees like we decorate Christmas trees? What are your Christmas decorations like?
I do. I love Christmas. So I, like a couple of years ago, started decorating at the start of November because I'm like, I'm going to put like a whole day into this. I'm going to enjoy it for more than 25 days.
Yes.
um,
You.
and I think, again, it's that same thing where it's becoming more of a thing. Like we always had Christmas trees growing up, but that was kind of it. Like you'd have a Christmas tree and you didn't really have much else in the way of decorations.
Oh,
At
okay.
least not in my family. But these days people go kind of nutso for it, just like they do in America, I think. So especially because we now have TK Maxx, which is like it's basically TJ Maxx. I don't know why the name is different, but it's
Yes.
basically the same thing. So we're
Okay.
even getting a lot of the American decorations over now, and it's just so funny to like watch the cultural change because Christmas used to be such a simple thing here. Like it was special and it was fun, but it was simple. Like it was very, very simple.
Do you guys do Santa Claus?
I think a lot of people do. My family didn't do Santa because Christians, so my parents just didn't really want to engage with that. But I think a lot of other people do Santa.
Like
And
culturally
I think it's
speaking,
cute.
Australia does Santa.
Yeah.
Is he wearing his warm gear, or does he wear like beach clothes?
I think generally he's just wearing his normal
Okay.
clothes, but there is a song that I remember from when I was a kid. There was this like kids band called High Five. If you're a millennial, you may have heard of them. And they had a song called Santa Wear Your Shorts because that was the joke. Like Santa needed to put his shorts on when he came to Australia.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, also there's Six White Boomers. That's a really fun Aussie Christmas carol to look up. Six White Boomers
Okay.
instead of reindeer. Like the idea is that it's instead of reindeer.
Oh my gosh.
It's
Okay.
so funny.
I'm going to look that
Definitely look
up
it up on YouTube or something.
and maybe I'll link it or something so people can go
Yeah.
watch it. Six white boomers. That's hilarious.
I'll have a think because there's a couple of Aussie Christmas carols now that I'm thinking of it. I'll send them to you and you can link them.
Okay, that would be awesome. I love that. That's amazing. Okay, and then obviously we've talked about that we're both Christians, and so you celebrate the birth of Jesus. Does the country as a whole
Mhm.
celebrate the birth of Jesus?
No, not really. That's something that honestly I really struggle with, especially with social media now. Australia is not a very religious country
Okay.
at all. So even like, like with TK Maxx, like I mentioned, having more like American products coming here, occasionally you'll find like a journal with a Bible verse, right? That is shocking when you
Oh,
stumble across one journal with a Bible verse in a store. Like that's not
wow. Okay.
it's so completely, like, just neutral, the culture, um, and if anything, I think Australia trying to be very, like, inclusive at the
Yeah.
moment, but it's kind of like Christianity has had its moment, and we were, I think, Christianity has its bad points and its good points, and the
Of
bad
course.
points tend to be the ones that are loud and get the media
Right.
coverage, and so there's not a lot of patience for Christianity at the moment, I think,
Yeah.
here.
Well, and people look at how Christians act. And unfortunately, we all know Christians who have acted not like Jesus. So,
Yeah, exactly, and they're the ones that everyone hears about.
yeah. Do you guys have you have freedom to worship how you want to worship?
Yeah, we have freedom of worship. I mean, even recently, there's been some legislation that we've kind of been looking at as far as protections for like Christian schools and things like that, being able to choose to hire Christians, for example, because
Oh,
that's kind of the point of a Christian
right.
education. So those kinds of things are a little bit at risk at the moment. So yeah, normally, like I was talking to someone about this the other day. Normally, our churches don't engage in politics a lot. Like, I find American nationalism fascinating because it seems like it integrates into church quite
Mhm.
strongly. Whereas here, church is church, politics is politics. And obviously, there's the interactions as far as like legislation and stuff goes, but it's just, we don't really talk about it unless we really have to. Like, if something is actually going to threaten our religious freedoms and things, then obviously we talk about it. But yeah, it's been interesting recently to kind of be like, oh, we do actually like we need our basic rights,
Well,
especially during like the pandemic and stuff. That
oh
was
yeah.
another thing that we kind of noticed. There wasn't a lot of protection for churches then either. It was
We had
really
that.
hard for churches during that
We had that
time.
a little bit as well. 2020 the pandemic was definitely a huge controversial time. It's crazy because our nation was founded on, at least our forefathers, basically our constitution and all of the things that we have are based on biblical values. And so we have had
Yeah.
a lot of, in our Pledge of Allegiance, we are one nation under God. So for the most part, our country, everybody used to be quote unquote believers. But even now in like the South, what my sister-in-law was saying is that everybody goes to church in the South, but not everybody is really a Christian. And I thought it was so interesting
Wow.
because being in Southern California, where I grew up an hour outside of LA, you know, film and television and Hollywood and all these things
Mhm.
very near entertainment. That I was in entertainment for a lot of years. So definitely a different culture. And so I didn't grow
Mhm.
up in a culture that everyone went to church or everyone believed in Jesus. But
Mhm.
she did, and she said that you had to kind of decipher and get to know someone to really know whether, oh, do they actually know Jesus or they just go to church, because it's cultural
Wow.
Christianity there, which is kind of interesting. But
Yeah,
so
that's
that
so
being said,
interesting.
in states like that, you have a lot more people celebrating the birth of Jesus, where it's
Mhm.
cultural Christianity. So even if it's a cultural Christianity, they'll celebrate Jesus. There's people here who call themselves Creasters and they go to church on Christmas and Easter.
That's
And
creative.
yeah, So there's that kind of culture, but I definitely think it's getting more and more popular, or at least more and more comfortable for people who didn't really celebrate Jesus' birth to just avoid that altogether and do the gift giving thing and the
Mm,
Christmas thing. And as
mm,
far as Santa and all that goes, I mean, to be able to relate to people in culture, even if they're not celebrating Jesus, because I like to be
mm,
able to share Jesus with them, you know? So
mhm.
I don't know. It's a weird cultural thing, but it sounds like you guys are kind of doing a similar, your culture is kind of doing a similar veer.
Yeah, yeah, and I do think that some people are starting to kind of go, "Hey, we're going too far, guys," because like a local shopping center mall, basically, we don't call them malls, but
Mhm.
um they changed their signage at Christmas to like "Merry Everything" or something, or like
Oh.
something generic, and
Mhm.
people were like, "It's Christmas. Like, calm down. It's Christmas. We don't need to go that far into inclusivity. Like, we can still call it Christmas."
Yeah.
Like, there is an origin story here. We don't have to ignore the origin story.
Mhm.
So that was really cool. That was really cool to see people at least have the awareness of like, oh, Christmas does have an origin story. Like, it's not just some generic holiday that is all about Santa and presents. Like, there is actually
Right.
a reason behind it.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And it's a nice time for churches to be able to do outreach and things like that. And that's something that our church really tries to do with, like creative productions and media and stuff. And
Yes.
it's a nice time to be able to really focus on giving back in that way as a church. So
Absolutely. And that's
we
kind of
do what
the
we can.
same thing here. So the what people say here is happy holidays is the
Mm,
PC. So if you go into a Starbucks or very secular business that isn't trying to claim to be any kind of anything, they will
mm,
say happy holidays to you. And
mm,
and so a lot of it too has to do with we do have a huge Jewish communities, and so people try to argue that, well, we don't want to push out the Jewish community because they don't celebrate Christmas, and it's at Christmas time they're celebrating Hanukkah, so we say happy
mm,
holidays because that's inclusive to everyone. And I think is it Kwanzaa, there's another one kind of like around the same time, and so everyone's
mm.
worried about making sure everyone feels included, and so that is what they will say about the happy holidays thing here. But then there is still a fairly large amount of people who will say Merry Christmas back, with kind of a a little bit of a if someone says happy holidays, they'll say Merry Christmas. you know, so it can be kind of same kind of thing here. There are still the people kind of fighting for it, and there's also the people who are just kind of fine with it going away. But definitely different than when I was little. Although there
Yeah, same.
is so on I don't know if you've ever been to any Disney park, but Disneyland in California actually has this thing called the candlelight procession, and it's been going on since for a very long time, 50 years maybe, and they literally have a choir that marches down Main Street, and they sing Christmas carols, and not just Christmas carols that don't include Jesus, but they sing Christmas carols, and then they have a celebrity read out of the Bible on Main Street the Christmas story.
Wow.
It is not advertised. You never know when it's going to be. My family was lucky enough. We had annual passes, and so we would go there often when I was growing up because we lived about an hour from there. And we went in
Mm.
one day, and someone said, "Hey, we've got some seats sitting right in front to watch." And they had enough seats for our family, and we went in, and it was Dick Van Dyke reading the Christmas story out of the Bible on Main Street.
Wow.
And I don't know how long
That's
they'll
so
do it for,
cool.
but it's crazy, especially because Disney is definitely a very inclusive,
Mm.
generally inclusive to everybody. So, but generally not on that side of things. So it is surprising that it's still there.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. So, I like that.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so as far as, do you guys do Christmas Eve? Is there Christmas Eve celebrations? I know you said you do like productions at church and
Mhm.
do outreach. Like we do like Operation Christmas Child and things like that, where we send boxes
Mhm.
to different countries or to even just locally to kids who might not have a Christmas. But
Mhm.
is there any other Australian, like of the like right around Christmas, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day celebration that is kind of known?
Yeah, so as far as, like, church goes, most Christmas, like, productions or things like that tend to be, like, kind of the week before, so, like, around the 15th, 18th, depending on when the weekend is,
Mhm.
um, and then again, it kind of depends on what day Christmas is on, whether we have a service, and it also depends on each church. Like some people always run a like 10 a.m. service or something, but that's as far as like Christmas Day goes. Christmas Eve, there's always on TV the Christmas carols. So
Mhm.
there's a big one in Melbourne and a big one in Sydney, which is in New South Wales, the state above us. And they're always like televised, so people like to go to those. They're pretty big events. I always like to watch them. Like it's kind of my little tradition. Like it's always at least on in the background. Yeah, no matter what's going on, it'll be at least playing on the TV in the background. Yeah, and as far as I mean, we definitely have had Operation Christmas Child here as well. That's something I grew up doing. My church, they do local Christmas boxes, like food hampers and things like that. So I think they did something like 13,000 of them last year. Like it was a mammoth like warehouse effort, which was really, really cool
How
to like
cool.
hear the stories of and stuff. Yeah. Like just so many families that actually they were talking, sharing a testimony about one the other week that was a woman who was about to go and like have to shoplift food for her kids for Christmas or something like that. And then the box turned up at her door. So
Mhm.
little things like that is just like it just makes Christmas that much more special to be able to do that kind of thing. Like really be the hands and feet of Jesus. It's yeah, it's so good.
That's so sweet. Now, what do you guys eat for Christmas? Is there?
My family's always been pretty traditional. So we'd always have like a big Christmas lunch, which is kind of what you would expect, like a roast of some kind. Generally, like you'll have some turkey and other things like that. We don't do anything like, at least my family isn't huge on desserts. So like even things like pumpkin pie and all of that, like I've had American friends introduce me to pumpkin pie. So anytime I have any gathering, I make pumpkin pie for people to like spread the message of the goodness of pumpkin pie.
Pumpkin pie is great.
But it's not a thing here, especially because the seasons don't cross over as much. Like it's
Right.
not fall and autumn right before Christmas. So yeah, my family's pretty traditional as far as that goes. But I think a lot of other people do, like more of like a mix of hot and cold kind of thing. So a little bit of barbecue, a little bit of salads, that kind of thing. But yeah, generally some kind of nice meal that you wouldn't normally have.
And I mean, here there's some people who do like a nice dinner, and my family never really did a nice dinner. We would wake up, my mom would make cinnamon rolls, we'd have cinnamon rolls and bacon and usually fresh fruit. And then later in the day, she would make something a little bit bigger, but it was usually pretty casual. And we usually did Christmas Eve at my grandparents', like with all my cousins.
Mm.
And so that was usually our tradition with food. But I know in America, everyone kind of has different things, like, oh, my mom always made biscuits or my mom always did this. And so then people, hang on to those kind of traditions of what
Yeah.
exactly what they
Yeah.
eat during that time. Of course, like Christmas
Hmm.
cookies and do you guys do Christmas cookie exchanges?
No.
Oh,
Like, this
okay.
is the thing, it's like Australian Christmas, especially until the last few years, has just been very toned down. Like, we
Okay.
still celebrate, but it's just very chill. Like, there's not, like, huge gift exchanges, and there's not huge things of, like, desserts and cookies and,
Well, it's
all that kind
also
of stuff. Like,
summer
it's always
when you're in swimsuits and stuff. So I was thinking about how for us
Yeah.
in the summer, we want to eat salad and grill stuff on the grill because it's hot and you don't want to be
Yeah.
inside and it's beautiful outside. So you want to be
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah. And Australia is notoriously, I think, generally like a more warmer weather country. Like if you had to poll everyone and find out what everyone likes, I think most people would say the warmer weather. So there's also that. Like we, as a country at least, live for spring and summer. I
I think a
personally
lot of
don't. I
people would say
personally
that.
hate summer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm too pale for summer. Like the sun here, if you ever come to Australia, let this be the warning for you. Buy good sunscreen because we don't have an ozone layer properly. So the sun here is fierce and I can't go outside.
So my husband's a redhead, so we have to be really cautious with him. I
Mhm.
I grew up with a pool in my backyard, so I was always outside and I tan. I like being tan and all of that, but I have gotten fried in like Baja, Mexico because of being on
Mhm.
the other side of the equator is like a lot hotter.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the sun is fierce here. It's even actually worse in New Zealand. I didn't expect that. My husband is from New Zealand and we lived
Okay.
there for a few months, actually over Christmas once. And yeah, the sun there is even crazier than it is here, like burnt to a crisp.
That's crazy. Um, so so you mentioned Christmas movies before and you said you do watch our Christmas movies. Are there Australian Christmas movies that show Christmas being in summer?
That's a good question. I don't know. Nothing is coming to mind. I'll have to like have a think and see if there is, but if there is, like
Okay.
it's not a big thing. Like, it's not a big part of the culture that is like, we watched this Christmas movie. I think everyone is drawn to the idyllic kind of stuff, and
Okay.
a lot of American movies are definitely very idyllic, I think.
Like Christmas movies are such a big thing and like we watch the same ones every year. We try to watch new ones. It's we have kind of like a schedule of watching
I
them
love
and
that.
it's yes, and so it's really and I was just curious because we have this ideal because of these movies that we watch and movies like White
Mm,
Christmas with Bing Crosby that I love and that I have this vision of like snow in New England and how that looks at Christmas.
mhm,
And so for me, that kind of gets in my head. And I think that gets in a lot of our heads. And so a lot of people will
mhm.
want to go where snow is for Christmas because that's Christmas. And so I was just curious
Yeah.
if there were any Australian movies. That's interesting that you guys watch ours. Are your bathing suits all Christmas themed?
Not generally
Okay.
speaking. I think they've started a little bit to do that again in the
Mhm.
last few years. Social media, I think, like you said earlier, social media and just being exposed to a lot of different cultures these days it's just changed Christmas so much in the
Yeah,
last 10 years.
that's so.
So we have what we call like rashi vests because
Mhm,
the sun is crazy
mhm.
here. So it's like the same like swimsuit material. We call them bathers here in Victoria.
We call them rash
Um,
guards.
oh yeah, yeah, rash guards. Yeah, we have those, and they've started printing those with like the Christmas sweater pattern, which I think is really fun. So they've started doing that in the last few years, and I think that's nice. Like that makes so much more sense than actually selling the jumpers, the sweaters. Like just print the pattern on a rashi. Like just we're going outside. It's gonna be hot.
That's fun. And then do you guys put nativities out?
Again, it kind of depends. I don't actually have a nativity set, which is kind of wild. I grew up having one like
Okay.
front and center, very much so. That I think my mum still has, which is nice. But yeah, sometimes like my local shopping center actually had one out last year, which was really nice
Hmm.
to see and shocking. I like stopped in my tracks when I walked past it. So yeah, it's definitely out there.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting to hear really that Australia just isn't quite so commercialized for Christmas, but that it's maybe moving in that
Mm,
direction. So it'll be interesting to see how
yeah,
it
definitely.
moves during how things kind of move and change. And
Mm.
I want to talk a little bit about social media, a little more, dive more into social media. But was there anything else in your mind about Christmas that you were thinking about or that you wanted to say about Christmas?
I don't think so. I think we
Okay.
covered it.
Okay. Do you do stockings? That's the other thing I was going to ask you.
Kind of, again, it's one of those, like, the last 5 or 10 years people have started to kind of
Okay.
do it. Before then, it was not really a huge thing. Like, I'm still kind of like, "Oh, yeah, stocking stuffers, that's a thing." Like, it's learning a habit kind of thing. So,
Oh,
yeah, only recently.
well, that is so interesting. It's been like fun talking about that and like the differences of it. But as far as
Yeah.
like what we were saying with social media kind of now causing so many people to be able to see so many different cultures and almost kind of pick and choose what culture maybe they want to be part of or what traditions they want to be part of. It's definitely,
Mhm.
there's definitely been a shift in social media. I think even now it's even more saturated. And there's so many
Mm.
people saying, like, I want to get off of social media. I want to get off the internet because it's too much. How do you feel about social media?
I love social media. I absolutely love it. It's definitely got its problems. Absolutely has its problems, but as a general rule, I love social media. I also don't think it's oversaturated in some ways because I feel like what's really oversaturated is the trends.
Mm,
And, when people jump on trends and then they all start posting the same thing, that's when it feels oversaturated. But when you think about it, like, the world doesn't feel oversaturated. Like, you could go to a different country and you'd wanna meet everyone, talk to everyone.
yes.
You could go to a different city and you'd be willing to meet anyone and everyone. It's just, I think oversaturation is actually more overconsumption of the same thing over and over again. That's my opinion on it
That's
anyway.
a really interesting perspective for sure because I think that our culture has started, well, at least our culture here has started to have this effect of almost like the reel, how a reel is, only a few seconds long and they're saying that people's attention spans are shorter and shorter because of that. But it's almost like that with the trends and just trying to move to the next thing and then that ends up feeling overwhelming. I was watching a reel,
Mm,
I think it was a live that you did a little while back, maybe like a few months back, that you were kind of talking about how people are talking about wanting to go back in time and live a simpler life. And that you had
mm,
this thought that you said, well, but what if we took what was good about those simpler times and just applied those concepts to our current day and age and rather than feeling like our current modern conveniences and the way that we communicate with each other is bad, that's the bad part, that it's actually maybe we need to kind of adopt back some of the good things like what was in the past and bring them forward rather than trying to throw
mm,
out everything that's new or current.
exactly. I mean, this is the thing, like, you go back to the 50s and it's like, well, I mean, I would rather not give up modern medicine and the right to have a bank account and
Yes.
things like that. Like, even just being able to do this is something that I see a lot on social media that drives me nuts in the homemaking space, especially, is a lot of women being like, yeah, the 50s, simpler times, like, let's go back to that. But like, you wouldn't have been able to do what you're doing now
Right.
if we did
Well,
that.
right now, so for me, it's 5:34 p.m. and that means it's 10:30 a.m. for you. Is that what it is?
Mhm, yep.
Yeah. So, and she's ahead of me, so she's tomorrow. She's the future.
It is Thursday.
And I agree with that. I like the fact that we can do this, that I can talk to you. I would have never have gotten an opportunity to be introduced even into your life or culture or perspective. And I loved one of the things that I loved when I first found you when you were Steph the homemaker, that it's so cool to see God putting things in our hearts and then seeing someone from that you don't know at all, but then seeing that it's like the Holy Spirit puts certain things in our hearts. And then to see someone that you don't know at all, but has the same heart and how it
Mm.
definitely brings us together. And I can talk to you today and feel like we've been friends and that I could hang out with you
Yeah.
and we would have a lot to talk about. And and
Yeah.
never met you in person. And such a wild thing about the internet. And for me to be able to interview you
Mhm.
like this without flying to Australia and recording
Yeah.
it back is amazing.
Yeah. I think social media itself is not the problem. I
Mm.
think it's the way that it gets used and the way that the culture is going. And that's a huge thing. Like it's not like something that we could just fix overnight, but I think sometimes we miss the point of a lot of things when it comes to social media. Even in the homemaking space these days, I feel like there's so much rage bait and like controversial content that it's gone to the point where sometimes we miss the point.
Yeah.
Like we miss the point of why we're homemaking. We miss the point of why we started talking about this. We miss the point of why we're here, you know? Like it's something that my church has been talking about recently. Like ultimately we're here for his glory. We're here to do what he wants us to do and to spread that to other people and be the hands and feet of Jesus, you know? Like and I sometimes I watch accounts and I don't think it's necessarily anyone's particular fault. I think it's partly just the way that culture has gone, like even the news, like rage bait is
Mhm.
everywhere.
Yes.
But I feel like what's the point of the rage? Like is that really does God really want us to be sitting here raging about what we're doing or does he want us to just influence the culture by being different?
Yes.
And that's something that has really stuck out to me, and honestly, it's part of why I took a step back from the homemaking social media space,
Mhm.
because I felt like it was getting super ragey and super competitive, like, there were a lot of people that felt like their homemaking wasn't good enough, and, you
Mm.
know, there's definitely a space there for people to show up in their realness, but it's it's so ragey that I was like, actually, like, I feel like God is saying to me personally, like, this is
Step back.
affecting your mindset
Mhm.
about homemaking, about your life, about your contentment. Like, take a step back, chill out for a second.
Well, and I think too, from my perspective with social media, is when companies began being able to advertise on social media, which I get. It's like
Mm,
driving down the street and seeing a billboard or something like that. I
yeah.
get that it's a great space for them to be in. When people started getting paid to do product reviews, which that's great. And that's been
Mm,
going on for a long time, actually. But
yeah.
that became kind of the focus, is to monetize your social media. And I think just being remembering while why you're there, if you have a business, and for a while you were doing a business, helping other homemakers and other women who wanted to be in the space to be able to do their social media.
Yeah. My focus, partly because of that, was always more working with service based women. So essentially, women who kind of wanted to have a part time job,
Hmm.
basically, but they wanted to be able to do it flexibly and they didn't want it to compromise their time with their family and their homemaking. So they could do it during nap time or, you know, in the gaps of their day. And that's who I really loved working with because I think that's amazing. And this is the thing, women have always worked.
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
something that, like, has bugged me about the homemaking space. Women have always worked, it's just
100.
looked different based on what the culture is like, and, you know, maybe there is something to be said for us going back a little bit to not buying everything and doing some things from scratch. I definitely think that, you know, being in contact with our lives, like touching our food and all that kind of thing is really good, but, you know, it even then, like, we have tractors instead of horse and plow, like, we have all of these modern technologies that just mean that even if you run a farm with your husband, the way that you work in that concept is going to look different than it did 100 years ago.
Mhm.
And so this whole like, oh, you know, like women shouldn't work or homemaking is the priority, like women have always been homemaking around working because you have to work to survive.
Mhm.
Everyone has to work to survive, and they always have. It just looks a little different now. And so if a woman is like, "Oh, a part-time job for like 10 hours a week is something I can do because I have a washing machine and a dishwasher
Mhm.
and, you know, a couple machines that mean that it doesn't take me 3 hours to do every single thing." Cool. Like,
Yeah.
that's just to me, it's just what culture is now, but it's the same out working, essentially. We've always worked. It just looks a bit different now.
Well, and I think it's, and I think you've talked about this before too, but, and there's also the emasculating of men to try and push women up, which
Mm.
doesn't need to happen
Mhm.
either. I feel like we can feel in control, loving our homes, taking care of our homes and our husbands and our spaces. And if God gives us something to do that's bringing in money for our family, then great. The
Mm.
Proverbs 31 woman did. Like, she had both. She took care of
Yeah,
the family, but she also had servants. And like you said, we've got servants, they're dishwashers and washer and dryer.
exactly.
And that's helpful in this day and age. And I just love the concept of, and that's on my heart a lot, to encourage young women that love your home, love being a homemaker. Don't feel like
Mm.
that's a derogatory thing to say, but you don't have to hate your home to be a viable woman in today, saying I'm a working woman and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing for women everywhere, kind of a.
Mhm.
So I think there definitely is a really good middle ground with all of that. And so I'm hoping, and there are people obviously like you, like me, that feel that way. And so it's like influencing, like you said before, influencing culture by being different and being around them. And the other thing that I was thinking about with social media is just that also, I think you get this push almost to like the numbers game of how many people are liking your posts, how many hashtags do you do if you're trying to get your account out there's all of these things that you have to prescribe. Okay, I have to do this reel that's trending right now, and so I have to fit this reel into
Mhm.
my genre, then my account will take off, and then I'll be able to make money, and then I'll be able to do this and do all
Mhm.
these things. And I think what God has taught me with podcasting and with doing all this, because my podcast is doing good. I mean, I'm not like millions of listeners, but it's doing good and better than
Mm.
I'm than some. So I think that's the Lord. And but then, my social media isn't necessarily huge. I don't have a lot of followers, a ton of followers, but yet
Mhm.
I have posted things and people have written me and been able to communicate with me there and said, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I had a reel that got 350,000 views, which
Whoa.
was crazy. And I gained 500 followers from it.
Mhm.
And it was a marriage reel. And it was just me and my husband, a video we took in San Francisco jumping, and we had the phone down. And I just put,
Mm.
this is how I feel about my marriage, basically, because people like to talk negative about marriage and we like to talk positive about
Mhm.
marriage. And so that was basically the gist of what I put in the reel. And I used a trending audio. And like 3 weeks after I posted it got 350 hits and
Mm.
350,000 hits. But no other reel I got did that many, like, and if you're chasing that, you start to forget why you were there in the first
Yeah.
place.
And I think that's the thing. You've got to be realistic. And I think that's where a lot of business related accounts that are like teaching people how to grow and all that kind of stuff, they sensationalize a lot of things.
Mhm.
And that's something that I always sought to not do. Which, kind of went against the grain a little bit. But like one of my old clients from last year, like she has maybe 2 or 300 followers on her business Instagram, which sounds low these days.
Mhm.
Like people will be like, oh, okay, like that's nice. She is fully booked, and
Mhm.
she has been fully booked as a virtual assistant for the last year. And she's gotten to the point where she's had to adjust what she was
Mhm.
offering as like her services and packages and things to make it more tenable for her, because she's like, I am booked solid. Like I have a waiting list from 2 or 300 followers. When we actually think about it and we try and take the sensationalism out of it and we think about it practically and go, well, actually, what's my goal? Like if I took away the noise of social media, if I just switched social media off for a week and actually thought about what my personal goals are and what my family's needs are, because also where you live dictates how much money you really need to survive and all these things. And, even if you have a heart for like missions and investing into that space, like what would you like to be investing into that space? Actually kind of taking that and going to the Lord with it rather than looking at what everyone's doing on social media is so powerful as a first step, because then you can kind of go, okay, well, realistically speaking, if I was to go and get a job, how much would I try and earn? Okay, so to earn that with virtual assistant clients, for example, okay, I actually only need like 3 clients a month.
Yeah.
That 3 people, like
But it
3
still
people is
makes
not many.
social
Like,
media incredibly valuable to have.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because even if you only have 100 followers only, like if you actually thought about having 100 people in your house, they wouldn't fit.
Yes.
Like if you thought about actually standing up and talking to 100 people about some way that you're able to help them with their business, or some way that you're able to teach them with their homemaking or whatever it is, like that's huge. And I think we get so caught up in the glitz and the glamour of being social media famous and all of that kind of thing that we actually forget reality sometimes. Because
Yes.
even if you have 300 followers and you start earning more than you thought that you possibly could, if you're smart with that and you take actual, like even biblical financial principles and invest it wisely and things like that, like it doesn't need to be 100,000 anything. It doesn't even need to be 1,000 anything half the time if you
Yep.
actually think about it like logically. And that's something I really enjoyed doing with my clients, is kind of like pulling it back and being like, hang on, but what do you actually need and want? What do you feel called to?
Mm.
Let's like turn social media off for a week and like just be with you and the Lord just for a second. That's the thing. Like, I'm a big proponent of social media boundaries. As much as it's amazing, you do not need to be on that constantly. Get off it constantly. Don't go on social media first thing in the morning. Don't let it set the tone for your day.
You're not helping people anymore right now, right? You're taking a break off of
Not
that
right now.
while
No,
you're
I'm
studying.
studying. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, so to the listeners, I'm sure that that gave you a little breath of fresh air and encouragement. I hope that that did. And I hope that you'll take that also into your Christmas season, as it's ramping up right now. Whether you're in Australia or in America, things are ramping up, things are getting busy, and there's a lot of pressure on social media and with work and with so many things. And I think we can apply what you just said to so much in our lives, but
Yeah.
especially social media. I love that. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Well, we are wrapping up. Can you tell everybody where they can find and follow you?
Mhm. Obviously, on social media, absolutely. So my links will definitely be, I'm sure, in the description. I'm always somewhere on social media, and yeah, 2025 is shaping up to be an interesting year. So
Awesome.
you'll have to come check me out on social media to see what's going on.
Yes, I will link all of Steph's socials in the show notes, and you can go and follow her and watch this beautiful woman of God in Australia doing her life, doing her thing, and not letting the social media overwhelm her and life getting crazy. She is an excellent follow, so go check it out. Okay, let's do the rapid fire questions. What are you loving right now?
Oh, my Hobonichi. I
I
have
was hoping
a
you were going to
planner.
say that.
Yeah, I love my Hobonichi so much. I haven't been posting about it a whole ton super recently, but I want to get back into posting it. Um, Hobonichi is a brand of planners, if you are new to that, and they are Japanese. And if you appreciate good paper, the paper is a whole different level of, it's not like anything else, and it's just so fun. So I've been kind of doing like a combo of like planning and memory keeping and journaling, and it's creative outlet.
That's amazing. So I've seen your reels and your posts about them, and I'm a super organized. I love being organized, and I like journaling, and I like all of that. So I've watched a lot of your reels on that. So if you want to know more about it, go to her Instagram and you can see more videos on that. what are you reading, watching, or listening to right now?
I'm actually not really listening to anything right now. I go in waves. I don't know if anyone else is like that with podcasts. But I am reading, it's the second Anne of Green Gables book. I think it's Anne of
Oh,
Avonlea. I
yes.
realized when I was a kid, I read the first one and I didn't realize it was a series. So I am now, like, for the first time going and actually reading the whole series. So it's nice.
That's amazing. I grew up watching them. There was movies that I watched.
Oh, I loved those movies.
Loved.
Yes, I
Yes.
loved those movies.
Yes, that's awesome. And then what is your life verse or verse that is speaking to you right now?
So definitely a life verse for me would be Isaiah 41:10, which is, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will hold on to you with my righteous right hand." Other versions say I will uphold you with my victorious right hand.
Ooh.
And that's been one that's just followed me since I was honestly like maybe 10 or 15, like somewhere in there. I found it one day when I was just really scared and I was somewhere new and scary, and it's just been with me.
I love the word victorious in there. God is so trustworthy. So but we need to be reminded of that because we forget that in the moment of fear. So,
Absolutely. And that's the thing, like in those scary moments, it's like, all right, I don't have to be the big one. Like, he's got this. I don't have to be all knowing, all strong, all of that.
yes.
He's got that.
Amen. Well, I love that. I've loved our conversation about Christmas and about God and homemaking and social media and all these good things. So, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for
Thank you
sharing
for having me.
it into your world in Australia. So,
Always happy to do that.
all right. Have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, too.
Yeah, you too.
All right, friends, I'm really grateful you joined us today. If you were encouraged, please share this episode with a friend. You can text it to them directly or just screenshot and share it on your stories or feed. You can follow us and interact with me on Instagram or Facebook. The links are in the show notes. Just remember, God loves you and you are not alone. See you next time.